Look, it might put a small amount of money on a pack of batteries, but I think instinctively that's why I describe the feeling that we all have in the past when we've put batteries in the bin, that we know that this isn't terribly sustainable, that we're throwing away something that does have value and someone is prepared to make use of. And I describe these as the growing pains of the transition that we have to make. And is it the right thing to do? You bet it's the right thing to do. Will it help us as individuals to recycle those batteries better than was the case in the past? Well, of course it will, because I can't think of anything more practical than having a bin receptacle in the shop that you bought them from, which is where you can take them back, when we go shopping again. And I do believe that in years to come, people will look back and say, well, I'm surprised you didn't do it earlier. So that's the answer that I would give. This is a change we need to make. So don't complain, get on with it. Look, I think markets evolve and markets change, and one of the things that the right kind of regulation can do is to help to stimulate demand. So that's approaching it from one end, and then there is price as a mechanism, and certainly that's been the chief benefit of the landfill levy. As I said earlier, I think a very well thought out policy which provides an incredibly clear incentive to businesses as well as local authorities, because everyone's paying the landfill levy if you're chucking stuff in landfill as opposed to using it for something else. And if you get those things right, then you help to make the transition. And if someone had said 12 years ago, I think we can get to 37% recycling for domestic household waste in 10 years, some people might have said, well, that's a bit of a stretch, but we've done it. But now we've done that, we've got to get on with the next bit, is my view.
I just want to make clear where the Aldersgate Group comes from on this one. It is true, as Jack said, that markets will respond, price will adjust to constraints on resources, but it responds reactively. It's our view, we've been described in the Independent on Sunday as a green lobby group, I see. Well, we're not really, we're an economic an environment lobby group, and our purpose is to think about how environmental standards can be an economic advantage. And so it must be true, it's been true in every other cycle of industrial development in history as far as I know, that if you're just a bit ahead of the market, you're going to be in a good economic position. Your businesses are going to be more competitive. So what we're saying is, as with carbon, get ahead of these pressures. Would that we had got ahead of these pressures on the example you gave, Secretary of State, on wind turbine manufacture, to take an example that just drops for some reason into my mind. Now, the batteries thing is a good example, because trying to be ahead of the game means that you are invoking or asking businesses to incur short-term costs for a long-term benefit. And they may analyse the situation and decide that's good for business anyway, and I hope more of them do. But in fact, as you pointed out, it doesn't really necessarily happen that way. And it is, I think, part of government's job to set the rules of the game, to set the playing field in the UK and the EU economy in such a way that it makes those, like the batteries thing is a good example, the regulation makes those costs unavoidable in the domestic market and pushes industry along, perhaps sometimes unwillingly. Surely the result is a more fit industrial complex, whether it's in the manufacture of batteries or manufacture of wind turbines or whatever it happens to be for the future. So really we've approached this as to what framework would be in the best interest of the future UK economy, and driving ahead on and anticipating resource constraints rather than waiting for the market to tell us what they are seems to us to be a good investment for the future. And that's the argument we're trying to make. It's not that we don't believe that markets will eventually deliver a right price, but by the time they do, we think it might be a bit late for the UK economy to benefit from it.
I think Paul Eakins wants a quick...
And it is very quick. You were saying that the manufacturers say it's a cost, but what we need to say, it seems to me, looking from the outside, is that throwing it into landfill is a cost. Because potentially there's a lot of toxic stuff there that comes out of landfill into all sorts of places, and there's plenty of evidence of that sort of thing happening. It is right for consumers to pay the cost of clearing up the waste of the stuff that they consume. And when in addition, because of the creation of resource markets, that provides a business opportunity to make more efficient and productive use of the resources which have been imported in the first place, that can become a win-win all the way round, but it has to be something that government stimulates initially.
I think it's the age-old conundrum of a societal benefit with an individual cost. It all depends on where you draw your boundary, as it were, because up to now we've been the cost of environmental pollution as a result of chucking cadmium and mercury into the environment has not been paid by us. And it's only when you balance the cost of cleaning all that up against the cost of having a proper waste management system in place that you will then see the equation moving towards the benefits as opposed to the costs. I mean, it's interesting that we are one of the last countries in Northern Europe to do this. Batteries were removed out of waste in Scandinavia 25 years ago, but for quite a different reason. They couldn't meet the air quality standards for incinerator emissions with batteries in their waste stream, particularly for cadmium. So they had to remove batteries in the mid-80s and find another way of dealing with them. Quite interesting.